Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar today on a very important subject of maximising apprenticeship recruitment. I think it's true to say, with all the changes going through with apprenticeships at the moment, I'm sure you'd agree it's never been more important, really, to refresh and review your approach to recruiting apprenticeships. Under levy funding next year, as providers, you're going to be talking to potentially many more employers than we were, getting many more opportunities, we hope, with a potentially a more demanding customer who are expected to make some significant contributions to the cost of apprenticeships in a way that we've not seen before. And you're going to be dealing with potential apprentices who are going to have some great expectations of what apprenticeships can do for them, particularly given the latest marketing campaign, the Getting Go Far campaign that's been across our television screens and mobiles and across the web, which has been very successful, a very positive campaign, and I'm sure will be stimulating demand amongst young people for to get themselves into a position to make the most of what apprenticeships can offer them. But as a provider, that gives you some interesting challenges to face. So it's always useful, therefore, to remind yourself of what best practice is in this key area. And to help us to do that, I'm delighted to welcome Claire Cummings along, who's going to be working with us today. Claire is the Senior Manager for Communications and Events at the National Apprenticeship Service. And I'll hand over to Claire in just a second. Just a reminder again, everything's all been recorded for later viewing, so you'll be able to download this from a link that we sent you, so you'll be able to go back and have a look at your leisure in due course. And we will circulate a written log of all the questions that are submitted today and all the answers that we give. So you will have a written document to refer to as well, but we will deal with as many as we can as we go along. So do keep coming in. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the question pane, so if you have anything as you think of it as you go along, please log it in the question pane. If I can respond, I will. Otherwise, we'll log them. I'll try and get as many as I can to Claire at the end of the webinar presentation, and if all else fails, we will certainly give you a written response over the next day or two. So that's enough from me. Let's get to the interesting part of the presentation, and I'll hand over to Claire. So Claire, over to you.
Right, thanks very much there, Paul. Good morning, everyone. My name is Claire Cummings, and I work for the Communications and Events team within the National Apprenticeship Service. And I just want to go through a few slides on stuff that we've done with CIPD research and some guidance on how you can probably make your apprenticeship vacancies a bit more appealing to young people. As Paul mentioned before, apprenticeships are changing. We have the apprenticeship levy, the introduction of employer-led standards. So employers are going to be more and more in control of the apprenticeship programme and how they spend their money if they're paying the levy. So they will be looking for employers who can offer a quality service and recruitment and who can help them to recruit good candidates. So part of the stuff I'm going to go through with you today is that I'm going to look at some of good practice in apprenticeship recruitment, which is a result of the CIPD survey that we commissioned in 2014, and I'll give you some insight of what the findings were from that. Then we're going to look at what makes a good vacancy, the importance of giving feedback to candidates. I'll give a little bit of an update on the recruiting apprentice system, which is going to replace apprenticeship vacancies. Links to support materials that will be there to help you, and some little bits of advice on how to promote apprenticeship vacancies, and we'll have questions at the end as well. So if I could just go on to the first slide. So the CIPD, like I say, we commissioned some research in October 2014. And that produced a report called the Match Factor, Good Practice in Apprenticeship Recruitment. As part of the research, CITB spoke to learning providers, candidates and employers to share their insights and what their experience of the apprenticeship recruitment process was. At the time of the survey, and the reasons why we asked them to do this was that we were finding that 40% of vacancies advertised on the apprenticeship vacancy system were only attracting between 0 to 5 applications. 2 years on from that report, and we're still finding that there are still some vacancies at the same level are really struggling to attract decent candidates and applications as well. And some of the reasons that were identified in the report for these low application numbers was that there is a failure on behalf of employers and candidates in seeing what the benefits of apprenticeships are. Some providers were selling apprenticeships as cheap labour, saying you only have to pay the minimum wage, which isn't really a selling point as far as apprenticeships are concerned. And also, some of the quality of apprenticeship vacancies actually on the system weren't particularly good and therefore weren't attracting the right candidates. So some of the main findings and challenges that came out of the report was that there were some poor quality vacancies out there. They didn't give enough information about the job that was being done. There was nothing to say what the prospects were on the vacancies, so it was putting candidates off. Low pay was one of the issues. Many of the apprenticeships were paid at the national apprenticeship minimum wage, but the job role was expecting a lot of that candidate for that wage, so that was putting a lot of people off. Employers had unrealistic expectations of school and college leavers. I think a lot of employers expected young people, if they were leaving school, to have more work experience than they actually did, and I think they expected them to actually just come into a job, be able to get up for work and do a day's work. But I think you know yourselves, a lot of people that when they leave school, they still need that support and mentoring to get them to that sort of level of ability. Young people's expectations were too high. I think some people were saying, oh, I don't want to work for this amount of money, but they failed to see that if you start an apprenticeship at a lower level wage, then you can work your way up and in the end earn more than, say, someone that's gone to university. And I think young people just expect to be able to get into a job, be able to earn thousands of pounds a year straight away. And they also had expectations about what the type of job that they want to do. They didn't realise that if they wanted to be an engineer, for example, you couldn't just go into that job without having to start at the bottom and do some training and get your qualifications. So I think there was a lot of misunderstanding on that side of things. And the other finding that came out of the report, that young people aren't being prepared for applications in the world of work. Now, I think we all know that it's widely reported in the press as well that schools and career guidance for young people isn't very good at the moment. And we know that the government is trying to introduce some legislation, possibly in a year's time, where schools are going to have to be showing that they are actually giving young people advice on all aspects of career progression, not just university, but also the apprenticeships as well. So that's where we're working with schools as well to try and get that information out to them. So that was, that is a big thing that we need to get young people to get more prepared about what an apprenticeship is. So the report did identify some really good practice with candidates and employers and providers, and some of the good practice identified with providers when working with employers is that they sell the business case for apprenticeships, they sell the costs and benefits of what an apprenticeship is. Providers were saying to employers, yes, there may be an initial cost to you, you may have to spend time with that young person in order to get them into a competent level, but the benefit of that young person and what they'll turn out at the end of the apprenticeship is worth it for you as an employer. They also work with employers to identify the learning needs that would support an apprenticeship. So if anyone's coming in without any experience, they're working with the employers to say, well, how can you give them that experience? Can you give them some support and mentoring while they're in the workplace to help them achieve what they need to do? And the good practice as well was challenging employers to pay apprentices above the national minimum wage, because that would attract more candidates and probably a better level of candidate if they knew they were going to get paid at a decent wage. So good practice when working with young people, the good providers were emphasising what the long-term benefits of an apprenticeship would be for young people. They were saying that, yes, this is what's happening at the beginning, but this is what will happen if you stick with it, and then you'll come out at the end with a good qualification at the end. Good providers are working with parents as well to get their buy-in, and they're working with schools to offer impartial career advice to young people deciding on what to do with their education. Good providers also use current apprentices as ambassadors and champions to go out to young people in schools and talk to them about the apprenticeship and how good it's been for them. So it's using their current apprenticeships, and that's really good practice as well. They also provide good face-to-face mentoring with young people and supporting them in the workplace as well. So when managing the match between vacancies and applications, they would help candidates to look for opportunities beyond their immediate geographical area. So we know that a lot of young people just want to work near home, but I think it's working with those young people to say to them, look, if you want to get on, then you need to start to look wider than your immediate area and travel, be willing to travel to get the decent opportunities. And also they're working with employers to encourage them to maybe contribute to a travel allowance if there's any difficult areas to get to, because we know that in rural areas there's an issue with transport and getting into work on time. So good providers are working with employers to make them see that if they want to get people into those vacancies, then they need to consider offering some sort of support if it's to do with travel. And it's also encouraging employers and young people to manage the fluctuations in supply and demand. So if employers are thinking of recruiting, say, May time, then they have to manage their expectations about the type of candidates they're going to get, because a lot of people maybe not be looking for apprenticeship vacancies at that time of year because of exams and situations like that. So poor practice. Poor practices identified within the report was that some providers were mis-selling apprenticeships as cheap labour. They were offering incorrect frameworks in order to keep the employers on board. So rather than saying, oh, look, I know you want this sort of apprenticeship, but I can offer you customer service which will cover everything, rather than passing that employer on to somebody else that may be able to give them the right qualification or right apprenticeship support, they were just offering the incorrect frameworks. There was also evidence of discriminating candidates by age or assuming that an employer is only looking for candidates of a certain age. So again, it was sort of pushing the 16 to 18 candidates because they would get maximum funding for that. Some of the adverts were misleading, apprenticeship adverts were misleading. They weren't sort of given a correct information about the type of role that they were offering. And there was also a failure to follow the National Apprenticeship Service employer referral process correctly as well. So when working with young people, some poor practice that was identified was, like I mentioned before, posting misleading apprenticeship adverts to attract learners onto non-employment learning tracks. We do, when we check the vacancies on the system, we do make sure that the employment element is clear, and if there are any vacancies where we think that it's not a real employment opportunity, then we will challenge providers on that and make sure that they put the wording right so that it's make sure that it's a real employment opportunity. And then there was a failure to tailor the apprenticeship advert to attract the interest of young people who were trying to recruit. And then there was also one-size-fits-all approach to a young person's learning needs. They weren't tailoring learning to meet an individual learning needs. it was a case of here's what we do, this is what you're having to do, without really looking to what that person's individual needs might be. So when managing the match between vacancies and applicants, some of the poor practice identified was that some providers were filling vacancies too quickly without careful selection of the learners to make sure they've got the best match. Ignoring unsuccessful applicants instead of considering them for future vacancies that they may have. So that's a case of, yes, you've been unsuccessful, but not even considering them for maybe another vacancies that they've got. And there's also failure to challenge the learner and employer's expectation of what an apprenticeship is up front. And there was also a failure to monitor the development of the employment relationship between the employer, young person, and so in order to avoid dropouts as well. So that was the poor practices identified. Now, at the end of the report, they did, the CIPD did make some recommendations, and what they're saying for learning providers is that they should adopt a good recruitment process and avoid poor practice as shown in the previous slide. With employers, they should consider the balance of long-term benefits of taking on an apprentice, take ownership of the recruitment and training process, and by that we mean that they should not just leave it all up to the training provider to write the advert and recruit. They should be involved in the process as well, because they need to make sure that they've got the right person for the job. They need to engage more in the process of recruiting an apprentice, have a little bit more say in who they see. Understand that young people will judge the quality of the jobs that they're offering. So if they're not offering a good job, then that employer's reputation could be spoiled, because apprentices that haven't been happy there may spread some bad news or bad feedback about them. Provide feedback as well. They must provide feedback to any interviewees or any applicants so that young people can understand the reason why they weren't successful, and then be able to amend their application or improve their interview skills going forward. And they need to understand that young people looking for an apprenticeship opportunity might have limited work experience. Like I referred to before, I think some employers expect too much of young people, especially when they're coming into work, because they haven't got that experience. And there's also, they should be looking forward to what the prospects will be once they've done an apprenticeship. Don't just finish it there and then. Is there any way they can progress on to other things within the organisation? There's also a lot of recommendation for apprenticeship candidates as well. What the research said was that young people as well should seek out their own career information and advice. They should be proactive in finding out about the jobs that are out there, finding out about employers that are recruiting, and if they need support, speak to a careers advisor. We've got the National Careers Service providers. I know you have careers advice people within your organisations as well. So candidates should be a little bit more proactive in what they do. Another suggestion is that they should maybe start looking for Saturday jobs to get some work experience. So it's not all about learning providers and employers improving things, it's also about candidates, what they do as well, and to improve their employment chances. So, what makes a good vacancy? We do have a lot of vacancies on the apprenticeship vacancy system, which are very brief, they don't give a lot of information to a candidate, so it makes it very difficult for someone looking for an apprenticeship to want to apply for it if they're not really clear on what it is they're applying for. So a good vacancy advert is an advert that would stand out and make candidates want to apply for the particular vacancy. And what you as providers and employers need to bear in mind is that the job is your product and the readers of your advert are going to be your potential customers. So it's a bit like a sales thing. You're trying to sell yourselves as an employer. This is me, I'm wonderful, look at this job I've got for you, why don't you apply for it? So that's you need to make sure that the job advert is there to attract interest, communicate quickly the essential points, and provide a clear response process for applying for the vacancy. So when we've looked at what makes a good advert, a lot of advice and guidance is that job adverts should follow the classic ADA system, which is like a selling format, in that you attract attention, you get interest from the person who wants to buy your product, then they have the desire to do something with it, and then they take action to actually do something about buying your product or applying for the vacancy. So with the ADA process, what we're saying is the attention. When you're looking at vacancies on the apprenticeship vacancy system, when someone does a search, the first thing they see is the vacancy short description, and that's where we think the attention side of it comes into it. This is the bit, the selling point of your vacancy that will make somebody sit up and take notice and say, I like the sound of that vacancy, I'll click on it to see what it's all about. So when they click onto the full job description, this is where the interest comes into it. You need to build up the information on the vacancy in an interesting way, and encourage the candidate to read on. And then the desire is relating to the job appeal and inspiring the candidates to want and apply for the job. So within the main vacancy description box, you've got a 4,000 character limit, which is a lot of words. So what we're saying to you there is think about the job that you're wanting to promote to a potential apprentice, sell the job, and then sell it as you're trying to speak to them in a personal way. So use words like, you will be doing this, you will be required to do that, because that makes the candidate feel that the job role is actually speaking to them, and then they'll be wanting to apply for that. And then the final part of the ADA is the action. So once they've decided they want to apply, it sounds really good, then the vacancy should make it clear what the application process will be and what the recruitment process will be. I know in a lot of vacancies that we've seen, there is a section called training to be provided, and that section is it's sometimes a lot of cases it's very limited in the information that's in there. So you need to make anybody that wants to apply clear on what it is they're going to be doing when they're training, what type of training they'll get. If they're applying through the online system, then candidates will be filling in an online application which they can just click and submit. But what they'll need to know after that, so that they're aware of what's happening, you need to sort of let candidates know that once they've applied, what the timescales will be, when they'll hear from you as a provider as to whether they've been unsuccessful or if they're going to be invited to interview. What will happen when they do get invited to interview? Do they have to do assessments? Do they just attend an interview? Do they have to do telephone interviews? So just make it clear what the application process will be once they've submitted their application, so that they're aware of what the timescales will be. If an application is going offline, and by that I mean going off to an employer website, I know that you've got the opportunity to include a link to that employer's website, but think about it. If you were a candidate and you just click on a link, and I've seen this myself when I've looked at vacancies, where candidates just click on a link and then they still don't know where to go because it's not clear on the employer website. So if you're doing applications for employers direct to their website, just pretend that you're a candidate, click on the link, and then go through the process yourself. So and just jot down each sort of stage of that application process, so you can actually inform candidates that that's what they'll have to do when they do an offline application. So what makes a good vacancy continue? So we think that attractive vacancies are written clearly without jargon or technobabble. I think we're all guilty of using jargon, especially when I'm working in civil service. We use a lot of like acronyms and really words that people that don't work in our sector wouldn't understand. So you need to make it clear. And I know in some technical industries you may have to use those technical words, but try and add a little bit of explanation about what they mean, so that candidates are aware of what you're talking about. It's very important to demonstrate progression and career opportunities at the end of the apprenticeship. I think that's one of the things that people look at when they're looking at a vacancy. They'll see progression and see what the opportunities are at the end of it. If they think it's going to be here's your apprenticeship, that's it, you may get full-time employment at the end of it, that will put people off from applying, because it's not going to be a permanent role. I think you should offer a fair salary. That's where you need to work with the employers, and if they're saying, I just want to pay the minimum wage, then just say to the employer, well, you know, if that's all you want, you're not going to get the really good candidates that you're after. And if you're asking them to do a lot of work, then people aren't going to apply if you're not giving them a fair salary. Have an interesting and engaging job advert, which I've mentioned before. It's very important to keep the candidate interested and willing to apply, and have realistic requirements regarding experience and prior education qualifications. We see a lot of jobs that are advertised with the minimum of 5 GCSEs, and yet the role that's being advertised doesn't seem to show that would be the minimum requirement. I can understand having maths and English, but do they really need to have sciences and other subjects in order to do quite a, not a low-level job, but quite a standard role? Give somebody a chance that may not have the GCSEs, but that, you know, they could be just as good as anyone who hasn't got them. So just bear in mind, and just regarding experience as well. And also, it's also useful to have a good recognised employer advertising the vacancy. I know in the early days, going back to when apprenticeship vacancies first came on board, there was a lot of reluctance on behalf of providers to name employers, but we found it in the research that if you've got an employer name on there, people who want to apply can actually find out more about the employer and decide, well, do I want to work for them or not? So it is always important that we have a recognised employer name on there. Just something to bear in mind as well for those that do use the apprenticeship vacancy system. One of the things I would suggest that you don't do, and I know that a lot of people do, is that clone job descriptions from previous adverts. Because I know that you may advertise for the same employer on a regular basis, but you can clone the vacancy. But what I would suggest you do is revisit that vacancy description with the employer, because I'm sure, like, say 2 years down the line or 1 year down the line, the actual role might have changed. So it's a good idea not to just click and clone and just change the leaving dates, etc. Actually revisit the job description and make sure with the employer that that hasn't changed, and you need to sort of update that to reflect recent upgrades in the job role. So, excuse me, some tips to recruit your apprentice. Be flexible at the SIFT. Don't expect vast history of work experience. Some people may be young, straight out of school. And this is where I'm talking about with the GCSEs as well. Some people might have just failed their GCSE, so they could achieve their functional skills with support from you as a provider. So don't just dismiss them if they haven't met sort of the 5 GCSE level. Look at the whole of the application form as a whole, and make sure, just see if they've sold themselves as well. Candidates need to be selling themselves to you as well, so it's not just sort of working on the provider side. We also work with providers and apprentices or potential apprentices, and tell them that they should also be making an effort with their application form as well if they want to be considered as for a candidate as an apprenticeship. Just bear in mind that for young people it'll be their first application, so give them the benefit of the doubt as far as what they're saying. consider task-based interviews rather than experience or competency-based. If someone's coming in straight from school, they'll not have experience and they'll not really necessarily have the competencies either. So try and build in into your interviews some sort of work play where they can interact with other people. If you've got a lot of candidates coming in for interviews, maybe set them up with some tasks and then observe them. I know it's time consuming, but in the end it will be it'll be worth it, and you'll get a better idea of what the candidate's like. Another question, I know in some sectors, yes, you do need an assessment centre, but if, I know that some providers may bring people in for an initial assessment to assess their English and maths needs, but it may put some candidates off. And then, so you need to think about that. Is it really necessary? And then also be willing to support your candidates through the process. Text them the night before they're coming in for interview, make sure that they're going to turn up, send them information on what they're going to expect if they're coming in for an interview or if they're going to see the employer. Just support them through the process. Don't just say, you've got an interview, we'll expect to see you there. But I think, and I know one of the questions that was raised prior to the webinar was, how can you get people to turn up for interview? I know it's difficult, but I think if you're proactive with them, text them, or even ring candidates the day they're due to attend interview, then that's, you're making sure that they will turn up. So, and just as a final reminder, that the key thing that young people are looking for is a wage progression and a job career at the end. So it all works together to give us that final aim for young people in apprenticeships. Right, excuse me. Right, giving feedback. One of the complaints that we get from candidates, and when we've done career events, we've spoken to young people, a lot of the feedback that we've had is that they don't receive any feedback from applications. They'll say that, oh, I've applied for X number of apprenticeship jobs, but I never hear anything back. And when we've looked at the apprenticeship vacancy system, we've seen thousands and thousands of applications that look as if they haven't even been read. These can stay on the system with no action being taken by providers to clear them. Now, what you need to bear in mind is by not giving candidate feedback or acknowledging their applications, it can demoralise candidates and put them off from applying for more vacancies. I know some employers might just hope that the candidates will get the message if they don't hear anything, but they don't. What they feel is that they'll feel that you as a provider or an employer don't value the time that the candidates have given to fill in their applications. So it's really difficult and demoralising for those people. So all I would say is, if you give feedback to candidates, it's good for you as an employer or a training provider, because then that'll make them feel that, yes, they've taken the time to give me some feedback, and if you tell them what they've done wrong or why they weren't successful in their application, give them feedback to say, well, it's not, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, maybe you should try this, then the candidate will know the next time they apply, this is what I need to do to improve my application. And now on the apprenticeship vacancy system, I know there is a button where you just click say unsuccessful, and then there's a drop-down menu to say reasons why. For example, it could be not eligible or unsuitable. But then there is another box there which not a lot of providers actually fill in, where you can actually give a little bit more information about why the candidate wasn't suitable, why they were unsuccessful. Just a few lines to say that you weren't successful because what you need to bear in mind is that candidates can see the feedback that they get on their own online system, so they can see all of the feedback that's given, and if it's just a case of press the button, you weren't successful and not suitable, well, they need to know why they weren't suitable. So just take a little bit extra time to fill in the box and put a few words in as to why they weren't unsuccessful. There is some guidance on the gov.uk site. Now I've got links to those guides later on in the presentation, and they will give you some useful hints and tips on how to give feedback to candidates, and there's a lot of feedback tools that you can use as well, which you may find useful in giving feedback. But just remember that if you give feedback to candidates, it shows them that you've taken an interest and you understand that they've taken time to contact you and that you are interested in them as people, as individuals as well. Right, just so that's the bit on the actual vacancy side of it. I mean, I'm open to questions towards at the end of the session, but I just wanted to give you all an update on Recruit and Apprentice. I'm sure you'll be aware that Recruit and Apprentice and Recruit a Trainee will be a new service which will complement Find an Apprenticeship and Find a Traineeship. And this is the system that will be replacing the apprenticeship vacancy system that we've got now. And just while I remember as well, just as it is a contractual requirement to post apprenticeship vacancies on the system, it will from August be a contractual requirement to post traineeship vacancies on the system as well. So any providers that deliver traineeships will be expected to post them on Find a Trainee or Recruit a Trainee. So the benefits of the new system is it'll be easier and more efficient to use. Linking employers will be a lot easier. You will no longer need to get the National Apprenticeship Service team to link employers for you. You'll be able to do that yourself. There'll be a lot of automatic validation of wages, working hours on the system. So if you try to put in a wage that don't reflect the working hours that you're offering, then the system will tell you that it's incorrect. And then there'll be more vacancy management tools, and there'll be quicker and clearer feedback from advisors and providers about the vacancies as well. So we're hoping to improve the service and make it quicker for providers to use it as well. So far, there's a selected group of training providers. There's only 18 at the moment using the new Recruit and Apprentice service to manage and advertise their applications. And once this has been tested further, they need to do more than 100 hours of testing and get feedback on what's happening with the process. And then the plan is that the whole service will be open to all providers in August. So all providers will be expected to use the new system after the end of August. Some of the important changes that you need to be aware of as far as the new system is that recruitment agents will not be able to use the new service. So any providers that use recruitment agents to advertise their vacancies for them will have to manage their own vacancies from when the new system comes in. And subcontractors will no longer need a lead provider authorisation to post and manage vacancies. So that will be easier for them. They will just need to be able to request access to the system and be able to post vacancies without the authorisation of lead providers. Right, the last couple of slides then is all about the support materials and links to things that we have. So, like I mentioned before, we've got some excellent resources on gov.uk. There is a one for learners as well, so they can get some advice on how to write a good application and what they need to do for interviews. But the two that will be of benefit to yourselves are the Training Organisation Support Guide and the Employer Support Guide. So within the Training Organisation Support Guide, we've got some information, hints and tips on recruitment and how to get vacancies on the system. And the Employer Support Guide is a similar type of thing, what you need to bear in mind when you're recruiting an apprentice. So we've got vacancy guidance and templates on the system. There's support guides for trainers, for training organisations, and there's also application, interview, CV tool, feedback tools, which are linked to the two brochures that I've got on that slide there. So the links that we have there, the match factor is the CIPD report that I referred to at the beginning. So the link is there on this slide. The vacancy templates that we have, these will probably change when recruiting apprentice and recruiter trainee comes on board. So currently we've got guides on there on how to submit a vacancy for both apprenticeships and traineeship opportunities. So they're very useful to use. You can use those with the employers when you're talking to the employers about the type of information that they need to put in. Then we've got links to the apprenticeship recruitment employers and training organisations. That's the link to the brochures that I referred to in the slide previously. Now, the promoting apprenticeship vacancies, National Apprenticeship Service will support providers to promote vacancies that aren't attracting good candidates. But we do have, well, we can do direct marketing for your vacancies by e-shots. We can offer social media support and promotion via Facebook and Twitter. And we can do texting campaigns, and we also work with other sites, sister sites like Job Centre Plus, Universal Job Match, Not Going to Uni, where they get feeds for the apprenticeship vacancies. But what we would say to you as providers is, before you ask us to do anything like that, we would expect you as providers to try and do what you can to promote your vacancies to people before you come to us as a last resort. The only reason I say that is because the staff that we have, that we don't have a lot of staff now to do a lot of e-shots, so you just need to try and do as much as you can before you ask for our support. In order to do that, we've got a brochure or help how to fill your own vacancies. We've got a step-by-step guide on what you can do as providers to promote your own vacancies. We also have RSS feeds which can be fed onto any of your own websites, where you can actually get the feeds, and the vacancies will come up there to promote yourself. So if you've got your own website, you can have vacancy feeds on there as well. We've got AV Live, which again you can put onto your own website and promote your own vacancies. And then we have a guide on what you can do to promote vacancies through the National Apprenticeship Service, and the link is on there onto that slide there. Now I'm conscious I've rushed through the last ones because I know we haven't got much time left, so I'm open to questions now. What I'll do is, I did have some pre-questions before the webinar, so what I'll do is I'll go through those first, and then Paul will sort of pick up on any questions that have arisen during the presentation. So one of the questions I had was, what plans are in place to inform schools of the changes in apprenticeships and the digital apprenticeship service? Well, we, as a National Apprenticeship Service, we've recently sent out an invitation to tender for organisations to bid for an IAG in Schools project. The successful organisations will be expected to inform schools about apprenticeship reforms, as well as the digital apprenticeships and changes to apprenticeships. So we are working very closely with the schools and with the careers enterprise coordinators on getting the messages across to schools, so that's all in hand. Two questions came in about SMEs and funding for them after April 2017 if there's no relevant standard in place. Well, we will be shortly launching the new business support service helpline for all employers, not just small employers, and they will be there to support any small employers with framework queries or standard queries. And the SFA have also confirmed that frameworks will not be withdrawn until new standards are in place. So there will be something there for the small employers, but the business support team will be able to help them and work them through to find out which is the best standard for that particular employer. Another question, we've had a few bright students that finished their apprenticeship hours and learning before the end of the year. Is there a way that they can progress onto level 3 instead of being held back? Students can go on to level 3 anytime. There's no reason why a candidate can't finish the level 2 and then go straight on to a level 3. So, I mean, there's nothing really to stop them from doing that. If it's to do with college years, then you could still get them to go on to the level 3 with the employer, sign them up, and then get some work experience done. But then when the college year starts, then that's when the actual formal learning will take, if it's a technical certificate or anything like that. But they can just go straight on to a level 3. We have low attendance on interview sessions. Is there anything we can do to increase attendance? I referred to that in the presentation, in that, if you maybe start looking at texting candidates or ringing them to make sure that they're going to turn up, because I do recognise that that is an issue, because some people just, they just apply because they're told to apply. So, but I think the more that you do to try and engage them before they actually attend, then that would probably help. Another question, is there a particular time you would start to advertise positions to attract school leavers? Again, this depends on the recruitment of the employer. Some large engineering companies have a lengthy assessment process, so they tend to start advertising early in the year, say February, March, for starts in September. If you're looking for school leavers in particular, I would say January, February time is probably a good time, because you might get dropouts from sixth form then. July, August probably for school leavers. But I mean, during the year there will be people that are still looking for opportunities, but I think the peak recruitment time would be August, September, October, and January, February. But just to bear in mind, I know engineering companies do have longer lead-in times, so it all depends on what the employer recruitment process is as to when's the best time to advertise. How are providers finding the impact in the raising of the participation age? We have found a difference in that number of 16 to 18-year-olds did decrease, because I think a lot of people thought they had to stay on at school. And this is why we believe that the work that we're doing with the providers and the IAG and schools projects will make people see that apprenticeships is one of the options when you finish school at 16. You don't have to go back to school, you can do an apprenticeship, and that's all part of the Get In Go Far campaign that we're doing, the work that we're doing in schools. So we are making sure that teachers as well as parents are aware of that, that apprenticeship does count towards remaining in education and training. A couple of questions. Does the language that the vacancy is written in attract a certain calibre of candidate? I think I've covered that in the session that I've done. Yes, it does. You need to aim the language at the type of person that you're after, so use language that they can relate to. And do I feel that the quality of the advert is one of the reasons why quality candidates aren't attracted? And but do you feel that the rate of pay is a reason why some vacancies are unfilled? And I think that yes, and I think I have covered that in the session as well. And a couple of late questions I've got is, do you have any tips when creating a title for the apprenticeship role to catch a candidate's attention? You're restricted in the title of the vacancy, and that you've only got a couple of like words to put in. So you just need to make sure you've got the level, what it is, and what the job role is. As try it as you can. But it's the short description that will attract the candidates, and that's where you need to get the wording right in that short description. And do you have any tips for promoting and attracting candidates for vacancies based in rural locations? Again, I think that was covered at the beginning, where we talked about maybe talking to employers to and offer a travel incentive in order to get them to apply. I know it's difficult, but if you make the vacancy attractive and you work with the employer to maybe offer some support for a successful candidate, then you should be able to attract some decent candidates. And they're the only questions I had pre the webinar, so Paul, it's over to you now.
Thank you very much, Claire. I would say we have had so many questions come in. struggling to keep up with them, to be honest. I've been able to answer a few as we go down, and there's certainly not enough time left to cover anything like all of the ones that are coming. But just to reassure everybody, if you have put a question in, we will make sure you get an answer to it if we can't cover it now. But let me just go through. There's a few that try and get through a few as we can in no particular order. Does Recruit and Apprenticeship, does Recruit and Apprentice apply to apprenticeship vacancies in Wales?
In where? Sorry, Wales.
Yeah.
No, Recruit and Apprentice is in England, just like the apprenticeship vacancy system was. It's an English system, so Wales will have their own system probably.
Okay, we've got no details at the moment on what that will be. I seem to recall not quite sure about arrangements for devolved nations yet. Are we on
No, not yet. No.
Okay. Also, hopefully a quick one. Just had a question. Could you just repeat who cannot use the system, please?
Right. Recruitment agents. One time, under apprenticeship vacancies, recruitment agents were able to register to use the system as long as they had a link with a lead provider, but that won't be available in the new system, so the lead provider will be responsible, if they're working with recruitment agents, to post those vacancies themselves.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Sorry, I'm just firing these off at you, just trying to get through as many as I can. Will there be a new employer's support guide to link with the new Recruit and Apprentice system? Yes,
we'll have to update all of those, the collateral that we have on the website. It'll all have to be updated when the new system comes on board, because obviously the wording refers to apprenticeship vacancies and there's screenshots in there that refer to apprenticeship vacancies, so they'll all have to be reviewed and updated, yeah.
Okay. There was a little rush as well when you were talking about feedback. There was sort of a little rush of questions all along the same sort of line. So I'm just sort of doing a very broad summary here about feedback on the system. A couple of people said that the feedback can't get my words out. The feedback box actually only gives about 100 characters in order to give feedback. So therefore, it can't be. They're not able to be particularly expansive in giving feedback. And is there any chance that might be expanded? One other person said that they're trialing the new system, and as far as they're aware, it's got no drop-down feedback system at all.
Right. Okay.
Any comments on those?
I'll need to check on that one because I haven't seen what the new system looks like. But having said that, it will be what we class as a minimal viable service when it's introduced, so it will be updated, and obviously we'll need to rely on feedback like that in order to get things put in, because the old AV system was very systematic. You couldn't make any changes without going through a massive remit or rewrite of the system, but if there's anything like that, they can be introduced later on. But I will follow that one up with Angela Scale.
Okay, that's great. There was another similar question, other end of the system, I think, actually, about could we have more characters in the short description box in order to attract attention, say 350 instead of 250. So there's some general feedback about that. I mean, where generally speaking, if there is feedback like that that's going to be useful for you to help develop the system, where really should they go to with that? Where's the best place?
Because I think that when the system's live, it'll be in beta phase, so there will be a feedback box. But if there's anything like that, just feed them back to me, and I'll feed that back to Angela Scale so that they can take that on board when they're doing the system.
Brilliant. Okay, so would it be okay if we put your email address or something in the Q&A log that comes round? Would that be all right for people?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be really helpful.
Actually, Paul, while you're on, I saw a question from Elaine Withercombe about progressing on to level 3.
Yeah. We've had a couple of those actually. Yep.
Yeah, she mentioned. So, can you say that they can go on to a level 3 if they achieve less than 12 months? No, they can't. They have. The minimum level for a level 2 was 12 months, so they shouldn't be achieving before 12 months anyway. But I thought the question was more about if they've done a level 2, finished it and completed it, then can they go straight onto a level 3? But they can. But the need to have completed their level 2, which can't be completed anyway within less than 12 months.
So just to clarify that, because we did have a couple of, there's been a couple of questions on that line. If you're on a level 2 framework, for example, that cannot be deemed as completed within 12 months. So you can't actually move on to a level 3, unless you've actually seen as completed a level 2.
Yeah.
However, one question came in and said, well, we've got some apprentices who are completing level 2 qualifications within their framework within the year. Can they progress on to a level 3 qualification? So not the framework, but the qualifications within the framework. Now, I don't think there's anything to stop a learner progressing from a level 2 to a level 3 tech cert or whatever it is within a framework, but the actual framework wouldn't be deemed as completed even if they've moved on to a level 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And is that right?
Yeah. I mean, as long as, yeah, you're right. I mean, the technical certificate, there's nothing really to stop them from doing the higher level if they want to, but it's just they wouldn't be able to be classed as an advanced apprentice until they've completed their level 2 apprenticeship and then go on. But then if they do their advanced, if they go on to level 3, then they've also, you would need to take into consideration the APL because they'll have done maybe as a level 3 technical certificate. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I thought that was the case. We got a question earlier on as well, which was along the lines. It's sort of a slightly bigger question, I guess. We've been talking about maximising apprenticeship recruitment. The operational aspects of maximising apprenticeship recruitment. But there was a question about how do we do it under the what are the implications of apprenticeship recruitment under the new levy system? Now, my immediate response was that, well, operationally maximising what you're doing with apprenticeship recruitment is probably not going to change. Actually, the basics of what you're doing is not going to change however it decides to be funded. I mean, my view would be, I guess, that the sort of messages that you may want to emphasise or give to employers or apprentices might change because the dynamics in the market have changed a little bit. That's just my view. Would that be yours? Do you think there would be any major changes to actually how you go about attracting or filling recruitment apprenticeship vacancies as a result of the funding changes?
I don't think. I mean, the activity should, be the same. You're still working with that employer. I mean, you just need to. I think because the job market's better now, so you're in a more competitive world as well as far as getting people. Because I think people sometimes say, I'd rather just get a job and not do an apprenticeship because I'm getting paid more money to just do a job. So I think it's still relevant that you need to work with the employer on your vacancy, but how you actually work with the employers any other way would probably just be the same, really. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so. I think how you go, but I think what we're talking about here is the tools that go in the toolbox for recruiting. What ones you deploy, depending on what the funding system, what the market dynamics are. It's sort of up to you to pick out the ones and make the most of the ones that are going to work for you. So yeah, I would agree with that. We are up to time, but just in the last couple of quick, but blimey, there's still loads of stuff coming in. Everybody's obviously saving them up to the end.
Sort of a hornet's nest, haven't it?
Absolutely. It's a really important subject, so not surprised. Let me just have a look, see if I can pick another couple of very quick ones, so we're not holding people up too much. When will we be moving over? Well, too much the same. When will the old apprenticeship vacancy website be taken down? And another one saying, when will we be moving over to the new website?
Well, you know what things are like with systems. The plan is it'll be the end of August.
Right, so it'll be a switch between the two at the same time.
End of August, yeah. The thing is to keep in touch, because the provider updates that we issue will keep everyone informed on that. So it's a case of, you know, making sure that you're all up to date with the provider updates that the SFA send out, because we will inform providers. And I think when it does go live, there will be some communication going out to everyone to let them know, because I think a lot of they want to get the old AV system closed off as soon as possible to get everything transferred over to everyone's. But at the moment, it is end of August.
Okay. Okay, that's great, thank you. I think we'll probably call a halt there. We are a little bit over time. There are plenty of questions that are coming in. I will promise everybody we will give you a written response to everything that's coming. So apologies for not being able to put those to you, Claire, for the moment, and to people listening. Claire, thank you very much for that. That was absolutely tons of information there. It's very, very useful. If you could just move on to the next slide briefly for me.
Yeah.
That's great, thank you very much. Just to draw your attention to some future webinars that are coming out, if you just move on one more for me as well. So thank you very much to Claire for the webinar today. I hope it's been useful. I hope these ones are going to be equally useful, and in particular, can I draw your attention to this particular workshop and online seminar package that we've got coming out under the Future Apprenticeship System, commissioned and funded by the ETF. This is a whole package of resources for those of you particularly that have been putting in questions about how the new systems will work. I've had questions about funding come in today as well. The Future Apprenticeships package overall will give you a lot of the answers, a lot of, you know, very updated information. Please make sure you keep up to date with the futureapprenticeships.org.uk website. It will tell you everything you need to know. And we have some more resources coming up on engaging employers and business development very shortly as well. So please go and have a look at that, book onto anything that's relevant. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you again to Claire for your input as well. It's been very much appreciated. Hope everyone has a good day, and I'll hand back to Jill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and I'll just add my thanks to Claire for her presentation, and thank you everyone for attending today's Future Apprenticeships webinar, Maximising Apprenticeship Recruitment. If you do have any other questions, please do contact the events team at AELP. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey about the webinar, and we would be grateful if you could spare a minute to complete that survey, so please do keep your browser window open. You will then receive a follow-up email, usually within 48 hours, with a link to view a recording of today's webinar, along with a link to view the PDF of the slides. On behalf of AELP, thank you for joining us today, and please do enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.